Hey everyone, Nick here from Talking Guardboard, and today I want to review with you the games that I recently acquired from a local tabletop board game flea market. Specifically, it was called the fall 2021 Minneapolis Tabletop Market, I think is the official title of this flea market for board games. And it was a couple months ago where I was on my Facebook wall and was looking through my newsfeed, and I saw a post about this Minneapolis Tabletop Market, and I'd never heard of this before. I'm originally from the Twin Cities area. I currently now live in Menominee, Wisconsin, which is about an hour east of the Twin Cities. But still, I was surprised to have never heard of this event because it sounds like something that I would never want to miss in a million years, because obviously I enjoy board games and I'm also a savvy board game purchaser. Typically, I will only want to buy board games at a discount, never at full MSRP. And the great way of doing that, of course, is buying a game used. If you can't, obviously finding them on sale or on clearance is a great way to buy a game, but buying a game used is a great way too, because my personal opinion, board gamers typically are very careful with their board games. So maybe unlike in other hobbies or other things that you might buy used, board games typically, when you buy used, are in good condition, because I think all of us board gamers really try to keep our board games in the best shape possible. So anyway, I really needed to attend this event, and I ended up going to it. I had no expectations. I thought maybe there would be just a couple people selling board games, and the people selling the board games might only had a handful to sell. And yeah, it was a little bit of a concern to me, because was going to be driving a whole hour just to attend, and to drive that far and be disappointed with only a few people would have been kind of a disappointment. But at the same time, I knew if I didn't go, I'd regret it, because I would never know what it was really like. Well, the other aspect of this event that also really intrigued me is the fact it was located in a local cider brewing company. And I'm a huge fan of hard cider, so to have an event that was selling used board games, selling board games in general, but also located at a hard cider brewing company, it was, I couldn't have come up with a better event. So I end up going, and something that I maybe should be embarrassed about saying, but I'm also not that embarrassed about admitting, is I'll have dreams where I'm surrounded by board games, and I'm like in a store with a bunch of board games, or whatever the dream is. There's a bunch of board games around me, and it's great, and it's like I'm in heaven. And then I wake up and realize it was just a dream. Well, I get to this board game event, and it was like my dreams. There was just tables and tables of board games, and all kinds of board games, and it was kind of overwhelming at first. And I'd been to board game conventions, the largest being Origins, and that was quite the experience. And for those of you who have been to board game conventions, you know what I'm talking about, where if you've never been to one and it's the first time you go to one, you're impressed by the number of board games. But what made this event kind of unique to me is I didn't think it was going to be that popular, and it was in a smaller area, so it just made everything that much more impressive to me, that when I saw all these board games when I arrived. So anyway, I spent several hours walking around and around the different board game vendors to make sure I didn't miss any great deals, to make sure I didn't miss any games that I've always wanted in my collection that were difficult to find, because people were selling all sorts of board games, many that have been out of print now for many years. And at the end of the day, I did walk home with 6 board games to add to my collection. Not that I needed any more, but I drove an hour out there. I couldn't just leave without anything to talk about. So I felt, why not do a quick video that went over the various purchases that I made, because maybe some of these games you also want to go out and try to find yourselves. With that said, let me talk about the first game that I acquired, which was Air, Land, and Sea. Now, Air, Land, and Sea is a game published by Arcane Wonders. It's for 2 players, plays in about 20 minutes. The reason why this game intrigued me was I was looking at it. I knew that it wasn't really a war game, so to speak. It's a war themed game, but it's very, very abstract in terms of how it's connected to actual world. It's a World War II theme game, and I don't even know if it's a World War II theme. I guess it's mostly World War II types of images. So yeah, it doesn't even say that on the box now that I'm looking at it. Nonetheless, I knew it wasn't really a war game, so to speak, but what interested me about it is it's a small box, as you can see, so it's easy to transport if I was ever traveling with my fiance somewhere. And it's a 2-player game, so again, I'm always interested in games that I can play with my fiance. But also, it's only 20 minutes, so it's a quick game. And for those reasons, and plus, when I was looking at it, a guy next to me said, "Oh, that's a really great game," and I forgot exactly what he said, but it was enough to convince me to go ahead and get it. It was $10, and I realized that it probably was it's maybe more worth $5 because it's a game that that is in decent distribution. I think it's not the most uncommon game in the world, and I think its starting price point probably couldn't have been more than $15. So maybe I got a little ripped off by paying the full 10, but it was also the first time I ever went to a board game flea market. So next time I'll be maybe a little more savvy when I'm making my purchases. But nonetheless, decided to get this, and my fiance and I already played it, and I have to say, I give it a thumbs up. It was a fun game, not overly complicated by any means. Rules are pretty easy to understand. And it's a great filler game. Obviously, it's just for 2 people, but nonetheless, a fun game, and happy that I ended up acquiring it at the tabletop market. Next game I want to talk about is Space Infantry by Lock and Load Games. Now, Space Infantry is a Space Marine themed solitaire war game, and I had heard about Space Infantry before. Actually, the game that I think I was more interested in was called Space Infantry Resurgence, which is like a newer version of this game, this game actually came out, I think, in 2011. I don't see the published year on the box, but I want to say it's around 2011 when this was originally published. And they did then make a newer version that was published a couple years ago. But I thought, okay, this was $10, and I felt maybe I just get the original version, because I remember seeing that the original version did have some positive reviews. So I decided to get it. I'm a big solitaire war gamer, so any kind of war-themed solitaire game is one that automatically interests me. Space Marines is a theme that I appreciate as much as the next person that appreciates that theme. So it was a game that I didn't think there was much risk in getting for $10. And worst case, if I really didn't like it, I probably could get my money back for it, and then maybe get that newer version, the Space Infantry Resurgence, if I felt that would be a big improvement from this original title. But with that said, that was Space Infantry from Lock and Load Games. Have yet to try it, by the way, so maybe I'll do a video about that game at some point in the future. All right, the next game I want to talk about is Proving Grounds by Renegade Games. Now, just like Space Infantry, this is also a solitaire-only game, and this game was designed by Kane Klenko, and that name may sound familiar because Kane Klenko also designed this game called Fuse, as well as one of the Pandemic Dice game. I'm forgetting the name of the Pandemic Dice game, but I'm pretty sure he did a Pandemic Dice game. And in those games, actually, I have that Pandemic Dice game. I should actually have the right title. Rapid Response, I think, is the game that I'm trying to think of right now. Nonetheless, those games use dice, rely heavily on dice rolling, and are also timed games. So you're trying to roll dice as fast as possible in order to do certain actions, and that's no different than in this Proving Grounds game. But the theme is different than those other games in that you're this warrior. Fuse and Flatline. Flatline's another game. It says on the back of the box that Kane Klenko did that also utilizes a timed dice. And I do want to say that Rapid Response game is a Kane Klenko game. But anyway, point is that you're rolling dice. You have only so much time, I think a minute per round, to then allocate your dice as you want to try to defeat these enemies that are surrounding your main character. And certain enemies require certain values and colored dice in order to defeat them. And what caught my attention was that this is a game that I often see solitaire gamers talk about. And so I figured, why not add it to my collection, since it seemed to be a solitaire game that a lot of people were playing. And I enjoy rolling dice. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of timed games, and actually I didn't know that this was a timed game until after I got it. Even though I had, and I don't even think I paid attention that it was designed by Kane Klenko until later. I was aware that Kane Klenko did those timed dice rolling games. So have yet to try it out, but definitely look forward to playing it. Whether I'll end up really enjoying it or not, it's yet to be seen. But that is Proving Grounds by Renegade Games. Okay, the next game I want to talk about is Hardback. Now, Hardback is a game published by a company I don't think I'd ever heard of before, called Fowers Games. And I think I ended up paying essentially $15 for this game. The price was $20 originally, but I did barter a little bit this time to get this game with the vendor, because I also picked up the Air, Land, Sea Battle game, as well as Space Infantry, and asked if I could get a little bit of a discount. So we'll say I got paid $15 for this game. Oh, and then if I didn't say already, I think I paid $10 for Proving Grounds. So the reason why I wanted Hardback is I was aware of Hardback. I was also aware of Paperback. And in fact, when I first was at this vendor's table, I was eyeing Paperback because I thought the idea of a deck building game that had a word theme it was something that I would be able to get my fiance interested in playing with me, because she's already aware of deck building mechanics from playing Star Realms significantly, and then it's a theme that I thought she would enjoy. But then also, I think other people, my parents, for example, grow up playing Scrabble, and this is kind of like a great hobby in my mind, at least. It's a good hobby entry level game, or Paperback maybe specifically would be a good entry level hobby board game for someone who grew up really enjoying Scrabble, and introduced in a nice way of introducing someone to the deck building mechanics. So I was eyeing Paperback. Well, of course, while I'm eyeing Paperback, a person that was already at that table before me ends up buying Paperback, and I was like, okay, there's so many games here, I'm not gonna cry over this. But then I saw at the same vendor Hardback, and I didn't know what the difference between Hardback and Paperback was. I knew that they were related. So I asked the vendor, and he just said that in Hardback, the market to buy more cards for your deck is dynamic and refreshes every round, where with Paperback, the market is kind of static, and he said more similar to Dominion. And to me, I don't even know if I have a preference in market for a deck building. If I prefer, for a deck building game, if I preferred one over the other, I guess I could enjoy either. So the fact that was really the main difference didn't really bother me much. So I decided, okay, you know what, I'll try Hardback. And then I ended up getting it. So I've yet to play Hardback. I read through the rules. Sounds like actually a pretty fun game. I enjoy the concept of building a deck of letters to try to spell words out. And it sounds like with Hardback, a lot of additional mechanics and elements are added to the game that don't exist in Paperback, which to me is a benefit and a kind of a drawback, because like I was just saying, the idea of a relatively easy to learn deck building game that was a theme that people may have been familiar with from Scrabble was what the selling point to me was for Paperback. Well, with this game, it might be a little too complicated for entry-level hobby board gamers, but for someone who's familiar with hobby games and very familiar with deck building games, then the added elements would be appreciated. So anyway, that's Hardback. I look forward to playing it, and already I really appreciate the aesthetics of this game and its box. So yeah, hope to get that to the table soon. All right, the next game that I want to talk about is Battlecon, specifically the Devastation of Indines box set. So this is a standalone game using the Battlecon system, and already in my collection I do have Battlecon War of Indines, and I'm trying to see where I have it in my. I thought I had it behind me. It's by Level 99 Games, and well, I'm not immediately seeing my copy of War of Indines behind me, but that's where I was first introduced to the Battlecon system, and that game appealed to me because Battlecon appealed to me because it was very reminiscent of the classic arcade fighter games like Capcom and Marvel, whatever I'm blanking on the names of the arcade games that were most popular, but you guys know what I'm talking about. And to have an analog game, a game that simulates that sounded really cool. But the one drawback with War of Indines is that it only was for competitive play. And at the time when I got it, I knew that, and I was fine with it. But since getting it, I'm realizing that a game like that to play competitively is difficult because every single character in the Battlecon series is so asymmetric that to play with someone who's never played the game, they're at a significant disadvantage. And you could say that, of course, about any competitive game. If you're playing with a new player, they're at a disadvantage because they've never played the game before. But Battlecon is a game that I think really exasperates the disadvantage a new player will have, because you have no idea what your character's good at doing, let alone what the enemy character you're fighting against can do. So for this game, I was like, well, it'd be great if I could play cooperatively, because then, it doesn't matter and I can be of help to the person I'm playing with. Or solitaire, of course. And turns out the Devastation of Indines box set comes with rules to play both cooperatively and in a solitaire manner, and actually has what's called a boss mode, so you can fight like a big enemy, or also a dungeon mode, which says 1 to 4 players can explore co-op. So it just adds a lot of modes of play from what I received in the box of War of Indines. Obviously, tons of new characters and additional content in that regard too, which I don't even need. Like the amount of stuff you get in the War of Indines box to me was a lifetime's worth. Like there's so much stuff that they pack. In fact, I would probably have to say, if I was ever to pick one board game in my collection that came out of the box with the most content to play with, it would have to be Battlecon War of Indines. There's just so much to go through because, like I just said, every character is completely unique. How every character is going to play with against the other characters is going to be completely unique. And then every player has a finisher, 2 different types of finisher. I mean, there's just so many variables in the game that would take forever to go through. So with that said, I'm really excited to some point play Battlecon cooperatively. And I'm glad now I was able to find it was a nice surprise to see this at the tabletop market, because it's one of those games that's at the back of my mind. Wasn't something that I would ever I don't think I'd ever go out of my way to get this and actually order it online, but a vendor was selling it. They were asking $25 for it. I thought that was a reasonable amount, and it is used. It was open, but it looks like everything. There's so much stuff in this box. Like, in fact, I think there's several hundred cards. So I'd like to think everything is in the game, but that is Battlecon Devastation of Indines. Okay. So my last, but certainly not least game that I ended up picking up at Tabletop Market is Battle Stations. Now, second edition. Battle Stations second edition. What is Battle Stations? Well, Battle Stations is actually a board game RPG of sorts where there's like a dungeon master of sorts that controls the enemy characters in the game, and then everyone else are the players or heroes in the game, and it is heavily inspired by RPGs, but it does follow, a pretty strict, relatively strict, board game play process. So there's phases and sequence. There's a sequence of play, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. Yep. So there's a strict sequence of play, which is normal for a board game, yet it has all these elements that you'd also find in an RPG, such as character progression and traits, and everything in this game is a skill check, much like in an RPG. And everything is but in this game it's a skill check on a roll of 2d6s. Then that skill check, like in an RPG, is going to be modified based on the type of profession your character is, whether they're an engineer or a scientist, or I forgot the other types of professions in the game. And then there's abilities each of your characters are going to have, and then there's races of aliens that your characters can be. So not only did I get this box base set of the second edition Battle Stations, but it also came with the advanced rulebook. Now, when this game was originally released, these were sold separately. So you would get this Battle Stations core box, which comes with everything you need to play the game, essentially, and a rulebook. But this rulebook is extremely light, and basically is what it's called a quick start guide, and that's really what it is. It's enough to allow you and a bunch of friends to understand how this game works at a high level, but you'd probably get sick of the game actually relatively quickly if this is all you had to play with. So that was the whole point of having this advanced rulebook, which in my mind then is ideally would come with the base game, because it seems like a necessary item to have. But that's just how the base game was originally sold. But at the tabletop market, the vendor was selling this along with the base game, all for only $40. And everything is basically in new condition. So I was getting so many compliments on this purchase. I was really proud of myself. Definitely, this game alone made the whole experience of going to this tabletop market worth it for me. This is a game that's been on my radar now for a couple years. I'd heard about it several years ago, and the other game that I, in my mind, felt it was similar to is Core Space, which I did acquire a few months ago. And the reason why I didn't immediately get Battle Stations is because it is still an RPG in nature, and that means that it's not like a strict cooperative game. But there is a section in the advanced rulebooks that in the advanced rulebook that discusses how you can play essentially a cooperative game and have the enemy controller be ran as a AI player instead. Yeah, I mean, I've been reading through this advanced rulebook, and it's actually an enjoyment. It's enjoying to read. The author and designer, this Jeff Siadek, apologize if I'm saying his name wrong. He really went all out in writing this. It's such an experience for me just to kind of read through this game, because there's so much flavor to it. And that's just the rule book. The gameplay itself seems fantastic. I haven't even talked about it, but basically in this game, there's kind of two games going on at once. One game is managing a ship that you and your fellow heroes are basically controlling. You need to potentially ward off enemy invaders, meanwhile making sure the ship is running appropriately, making sure the engines are are powering the various modules as needed, making sure that the ship is directed in the right direction and going at the right speed, and that you have a hero manning the gun module in case you have enemies to shoot at, other enemy ships to shoot at. But also there's a separate map, which is like the outer space map, which you have your where your ship is just a token moving through space, and after every turn your location on this large map updates based on where you've positioned your ship and how fast you're going, which is based on the actions you're taking, on this other ship map, ship diagram map, if you want to call it that. And so that to me was just the defining feature of the game that really caught my attention, is that you have it seemed kind of realistic in that you're in this ship that's going through space and you're actually, caring about both aspects. You're caring about the ship itself, but also, outside space where you're going. And that then opens up, I haven't gone through all the different scenarios in this game, but as you can imagine, that opens up so many doors for all sorts of unique types of scenarios where you might be engaging with enemy ships. You might need to go someplace with your ship and then land and then get off and come back. The possibilities really are endless. It is overwhelming. I will say that for sure. This advanced rulebook is, in total, the advanced rulebook is definitely over 100. This appendix. Oh, yeah, it's 300 pages total. Now, a lot of those pages are dedicated to the various scenarios in the book, but it's a lot to read through, and that's going to, of course, detract probably a typical board gamer that just wants to get into a board game, and that's why it's really marketed as a RPG. But why I am okay, and I typically don't like RPGs, but this is a game that has a strict enough sequence of play that I'm willing to take a chance on it, and think I definitely could get a lot of my friends interested in playing it as well. And in fact, I'll have my bachelor party in December, and the whole theme of the party is going to be playing board games and video games for 2 days straight. And I'm planning to bring this game there to play with my friends, because I just think that they will really enjoy this game, since they've sometimes will play RPGs, and this is, like I said, an RPG with the structure that a board game has, and I really could go on and on about how interesting and exciting this game is to me, and I have never even played it. So that was the last purchase I ended up making at the tabletop market. I was hoping that there might be a little bit of a larger selection of war games there. There were some vendors that had a few different, games from the traditional war game companies like GMT, but not as much as I would have hoped, considering the amount of board games in general that were there. But nonetheless, I was pleased with what I came home with, and am definitely looking forward to the next tabletop market whenever that's held. With that said, hopefully you guys saw some games that sparked your interest and are able then to maybe look into getting them on your own. With that said, feel free to leave any questions or comments in the comments section on this video. I'm very interested in what you guys have to say about what I brought home. But with that said, thanks so much for watching, guys. I'm Nick from Talking Cardboard, and hope to see you all again soon.